Thank
I am Dr. Charlotte Pence. I direct the creative writing program at the University of South Alabama. We have a master's in creative writing. If you're interested, it's concentration in creative writing. And I also direct the Stokes Center for Creative Writing that brings events like this to anybody in the world, which is a wonderful thing with Zoom. So, as I mentioned before, this is going to be recorded just to make sure that the people in our audience know that in case they would like to turn off their camera. So I'm going to do a very brief introduction because we are all here for Patricia Smith. And oh my gosh, you know how wonderful she is. 8 books, won the NAACP Image Award in 2018, the Los Angeles Times Book Prize, finalist for the Pulitzer National Book Award. She's just amazing. So without further ado, please welcome Patricia Smith.
Oh, no more ado, huh? Thank you, everybody. So the the way that this was described to me is you kind of go through your progression from the beginning of your career up to where you are now and insert poems where you thought that made sense. But my career started like in the late 80s. And I think what I decided to do is I'm going to capsulize it. And I've chosen, I think, 2 poems from each book. It really is a revelation to me to read from the earlier books because as you might suspect, as I was going along, I was learning a lot. I got introduced to poetry by getting up on stage and doing it in Chicago at the very, very beginnings of the poetry competitions and the poetry slams, things like that. And for a long, long time, uh, we were just kind of preaching to the converted. There was a place called the Green Mill, and it was where the poetry slam began. And I would be there every Sunday for about 3 hours, and we would have an open mic, a featured poet, and a poetry slam. Um, the first time I went there, I was clutching a friend had taken me, and I was clutching a couple of poems, and I had enough nerve to get up in the open mic. And I watched the feature, who was a woman named Lisa Boscani. And what I remember about Lisa Boscani is she did a persona poem in the voice of the barber who cut the hair of people who were about to go in the gas chamber. And after the poem, there was like this white hot moment of silence. Nobody knew what to do. And I said, I've never seen a writer have that kind of control over the reaction of an audience. And then I hung out for the poetry slam, which absolutely horrified me at first. But then I discovered that I'm kind of competitive, you know. And I thought, well, I could do that, and I have to understand the personality of this place. You would hear something in the open mic and sit down and write a response poem and raise your hand so you can get it at the end of the open mic to respond to something you heard earlier. I mean, it was this constant tunnel of energy, and the idea that we were just kind of talking to each other. Like, this is something that happened to me today. There were people who had just gotten out of jail. There were people who bagged groceries and pumped gas, and there were teachers and there were students, and everybody figured that that Sunday night, that a Green Mill was the most important place for them to be. And some of them you only saw once because they had a story that they wanted to tell you. Some of them you saw week after week. But it was like like we were bartering the human story, you know. And I was not thinking of publication. I wasn't thinking of the academic, for lack of a better term, aspect of what I was doing. Uh, we kind of considered ourselves rebels. We don't need your stinking grant money, that kind of stuff. Um, and so, but we were sheltered in a way. As long as we thought of ourselves that way, we didn't have to think about what the demands were of moving ahead with our work. Um, we just assumed that, we were we were like a movement, and then there was the academic people, and we kind of distrusted each other. We had huge audiences. They distrusted us. Where'd you get that audience? We didn't legitimize that. And we were like, well, we don't want your money. We don't want these things. And we were always doing the same thing, you know, and I think the key to my career was the realization that we were doing the same thing. I think there are people who started out in the poetry slam who are still doing it, you know, because they don't want to answer the questions that they'd have to ask about making a career out of it, you know. So this book is called Life According to Motown. My life is ruled by Motown music. Whenever I have a chance to listen, that's what I listen to. I think my poems are narrative because those songs were narrative. They always had a beginning, a middle, and an end. And they were metrically. If you look at listen to some of Smokey Robinson's writing, he was writing in form. And so all that eventually came back to me. This is like a little big-headed picture of me when I was 4 years old, all forehead. But this book came about. How did I get to do a book? Some of you may know there's a guy, he was a poet laureate of LA at one point. His name's Louis Rodriguez. And Louis Rodriguez was in the Breen Mill at the same time I was, and he came up and said, I'm going to start a press. Do you have a manuscript? And I said, yes. And that's what you should say anytime anybody says that, and then you worry about it later. So this book is basically me putting together all the poems I was reading live at the time. There's really no narrative arc or anything, although, you know, subconsciously you are coming back to a lot of the same subject matter. So, and I said yes, and before I knew it, I had a book. And I would change probably absolutely every poem in this book right now. They're very undisciplined. I had no idea about line breaks or any of that stuff. What I was doing is I was breaking the line as I was performing the poem. I would breathe and go, oh, time for a line break, time for a line break, you know? And so that's what we got. So I picked 2 poems out of here. And then you may ask me, well, which ones? Because, oh, okay. So this is I watch a lot of bad movies. I'm like a camp person. I love terrible television and bad movies, and you know, I'm the one that says, I'm driving along and go, oh, world's largest skillet, we have to go, you know, that kind of stuff. So this poem was after I watched for the first time Jason and the Argonauts, you know, that whole thing. And it wasn't Jason and the Argonauts. What was it called? Okay, anyway. But anyway, Medusa, Jason was trying to get a hold of Medusa. And it made me think, how did Medusa become Medusa? And what she did, she got in trouble like a lot of us women do. We made love to the wrong guy. Clash of the Titans, that's it, okay. So, you know Clash of the Titans, because you know how you're getting ready for school or work or something, and you see the skeletons fighting, and you go, okay, I can't go in now, I have to see this. Yeah, so it was when Jason, the Clash of the Titans things, you remember the Medusa scene? It's all like, you know, and it's in the dark, and you know. So I figured out that Medusa became Medusa because she made love to Poseidon in Athena's temple, which you should never do. And Athena got pissed off and turned her into the snakehead woman. So I thought I was going to write a funny poem, but it didn't wind up being funny. So this is a persona poem in Medusa's voice. Poseidon was easier than most. He calls himself a god, but he fell beneath my fingers with more shaking than any mortal. He wept when my robe fell from my shoulders. I made him bend his back for me, listen to his screams break like waves. We defile that temple the way it should be defiled, squirming and bucking our way from corner to corner. You know, the bitch goddess probably got a real kick out of that. I'm sure I'll be hearing from her. She'll give me nightmares for a week or so, that I can handle, or she'll turn the water in my well into blood. I'll scream when I see it, and that'll be that. Maybe my first child will be born with the head of a fish. I'm not even sure it was worth it. Poseidon pounding away at me like a madman, losing his immortal mind because of the way my copper skin swells in moonlight. Now my arms smoke and itch. Hard scales are rising on my wrist like armor. Come on, Athena. He was just another lay, and not a particularly good one at that, even though he could spit steam from his fingers. I won't touch him again. Promise. And we didn't mean to drop to our knees in your temple, but our bodies were so hot and misaligned. It's not every day a gal gets to sample a god, you know that. Why are you being so rough on me? I feel my eyes twisting, the lids crusting over and boiling, the pupils glowing like red coals. Athena, woman to woman, could you have resisted him? Would you have been able to wait for the proper place, the right moment to jump those immortal bones? Now my feet are tangled with hair. My ears are gone. My back is curving and my lips have grown numb. My garden boy just shattered at my feet. Damn it, Athena. Take away my father's gold. Send me away to live with lepers. Give me a pimple or two. But my face, to have men never again gaze at my face, growing stupid in anticipation of that first touch. How can any woman live like that? How can I watch their warm bodies turn to rock when their only sin was desiring me? They just want to see me sweat. They just want to run their fingers along my face and touch my hair. Is it moving? Thank you, thank you. Okay, and another early period one. And actually I had them turned down and now they're not turned down anymore. So I'm doing that thing that people hate to see poets doing, which is this. Da-na-na-na-na-na-na. All right, I know which one I wanted. Okay, I'll do this one. I don't want to do the other one because it's kind of a bad news. We had a contest in Chicago. We had a poetry-wide contest every year. Poetry-wide, citywide contest every year. And the winner of the contest would go for a trip to one of Chicago's sister cities. And one year it was, the trip was to Osaka, and the poem had to be about a tree because we were going to some environmental festival or something. And so a citywide call went out that someone had to write a poem about a tree. And I said, okay, I can do that. So I did. Okay. But this is a totally manipulative poem. I was trying to win a contest. And you'll see how I won the contest when I get to the end of the poem. So I was going to write a contest about a tree, Jeez. I was going to write a poem about a tree on the lakefront in Lake Michigan and how the tree changed during the seasons. It's called The Awakening. Since Mother Morning wiped clean the chaotic slate of starlight, hard winds have forced the tree to beg. She bends and splinters, bracing against their steady push, her spindly brown fingers cramped and stretched toward an impossible solace. All of her strains toward the sun, which is now just a pulse in the lightning sky, without the strength to poke its teasing slivers of light through the solid gray cloak of clouds. To move minutes, she curls her toes deep into moist ribbons of soil. Her skin grows wet. The lake roars in, chilling her thick ankle, and she whistles her sudden ache toward the skyline with its bright confusion of buildings and sound. The sun chuckles low in his throat, watching her fingers freeze and crack. Suddenly, he smacks one of her glistening sides with heat. She rises on her toes and once again throws her tired, cold body open to her regretless love while the lake curls away and the wind dies to a whisper. Tomorrow. The tree stands taller, begins to breathe in voices, rhythms, the blessings of sun. She knows many things, much more than the body suddenly flat against her seeking shade. She knows the lovers who stop to scratch their hopeful names into her skin. She knows the uncertain geography of rainfall, and she has a name for the moan that worries gently in her hair. It is called Chicago. Yay, she said Chicago, yay, give her the trip, yay! So I worked to Chicago and at the end of the poem and I got to go to Osaka. Okay. After the Green Mill, another publisher came up, had seen me at the Green Mill and asked me if I wanted to switch publishers. And since the publisher I was with at first was very much kind of like a launch pad, I thought for sure. And my second book was called Big Towns, Big Talk. I was still very much, the reason you saw me laughing during part of the poems is like, I would write that so totally different now. And I'm listening to it going, oh my God, that is so bad. So that's why so you basically hired me to read bad poems, Charlotte, I'm sorry. Okay, so these are two from Big Towns, Big Talk. I was doing a lot more traveling for poetry. And so this poem is called Doing the Louvre. And this is the first time that I traveled to Europe to do poetry. And I was with a friend of mine named Michael War and his wife, Patricia Zamora. And so she's Mexican and I was Black. And they had to kind of, the Louvre, you know how Americans, when they go places, they want to act like they're the first people to see it. You know, like, oh, that would be the so-and-so and so, that, you know, and I hate it. So this is all about discovery and being chased through the Louvre. We didn't steal anything, but that's okay. You're a junkie, just like I am. After we dump your husband in the Louvre's cafe to sip the steaming tea and chew on his poetry, we're off like schoolgirls, screeching in duet, dazzled by the bright, eternal gasp of ancient things. We've got no business here, homegirl and compañera. We've got no business working our mouths around this sharp, exquisite language or savoring the sweet tongue squeeze of pastries, shining cakes, and shaved chocolates. We're of simpler stock, city and country dust, collard greens, moon pies, bullet holes, and basement slow dances. We are shamelessly American, rough street girls with rusty knees, the flip side of cocky Parisian wisp and slim cashmere coats the color of tobacco. Girlfriend, you and I are too much scream for this place because you're a junkie just like I am. Too long denied access to official beauty, we walk these streets with our mouths open and faces tilted up, swallowing everything, swallowing it all, much too much scenery and sound for our thin American throats. We gawk at cathedrals with their eerie snarls. No, never mind. We gawk at cathedrals with their gargoyles bleached to an eerie snarl by bright slashes of moon. Say goodbye when we mean yes. Good morning when we mean how much. Ask for bread when we need the toilet. We are amazed that no one is asking for all of this back, that we are allowed to bask in this city's light. I can still hear my mama as plain and practical as a cast iron skillet. Child, you need to stop all that foolishness over there in some France where you don't know nothing or nobody. Ain't no Black folks over there now how. But I know you, old friend, with your bright burnished tangle of hair and deep laugh, and right now these halls belong to us. There are bad girls loose in the Louvre, girls soft as gunshots, girls nourished and fueled by silvers, silks, and the stone gaze of Napoleon. We laugh at the smashed noses of Egyptian rulers, stare at the tiny mummified feet of a young girl, mistake Goya for Gauguin, and rub what surfaces we can, including the marble cocks of towering deities. When we say things like, hey, I think I saw that on a postcard once, or do you know how old this thing is? How can the world help us love us? We would give Venus our arms. After 8 hours clicking our hungry heels and flashing illicit flash photos in dark halls brimming with ancient music, we finally find the Mona Lisa, alone, caged and antiseptic behind that glass every woman wears. And we wonder how best to free her, knowing she's a junkie just like we are. She longs for our wild voices, our naive and accidental beauty. She's aching to ditch that frame and skip these hallowed halls with the homegirls, mistake the obscene for the exquisite, and gaze at unsolved mysteries that just for once are not her own. And the other, oh, this is the other bad movie poem. This was after, what were those Leslie, oh my God, what were those movies called? No, the Leslie Nielsen movies. And nobody, oh, okay. Anyway, there was a Leslie Nielsen movie, and Naked Gun. I'm telling you, you guys are on the case. Naked Gun movies, and this is like Naked Gun 2 1/3, I don't know. But he had cheated or something on the Priscilla Presley character, and when they had the fight, he went to a bar, and it was supposedly a bar where men went when you broke their hearts. And so you went in and they were like looping nooses and loading pistols, and then there was pictures on the wall. So there was a picture of the Hindenburg, all these, and for some reason there was a picture of Michael Dukakis, and I never figured that out. But I started to think, what would it be like if there was really a bar where men went where we broke their hearts? So this is called In the Ultimate Blues Bar. In the Ultimate Blues Bar, men sip their bitter cocktails, slide damp dollars across the bar, and wheeze in rhythm, resenting the relentless thump of their late night hearts. They speak fondly of natural disasters, predict how the missing child will be found naked beneath a blanket of dead leaves. Someone pops a quarter in the jukebox, and feet tap to the dirge of downbeats, the been done wrong grunts that slug through the blood like a blind fighter. When a woman rips a man open, this is where he comes to bleed. I should have known that she was no good, screams a truck driver from his corner table. I should have seen she was what she was. The circus lights of the jukebox break across his face, fill his toothless mouth with color as he screams the name, Janet, as he curses it up and down the greasy walls, drags it in the muck on the floor in front of his friends. He pulls the name back up on the table and he tries to slice his wrist with it. He holds the name up against his skull and waits for it to scatter his brains. He swallows it and sits death still so the poison can creep into his blood. He takes the name, Janet, and he rocks the room with it. I should have seen she was no good for me. I should have listened to my friends. I should have looked deep into her smoky black eyes and walked out on what they told me. And damn it, Janet, and screaming the name over and over and over like he's purging his belly of bad whiskey, he staggers to the jukebox and plays another long, slow song by a blind black man. Tonight, he's got that run from Moline to Macon, and Janet will sleep curled in a bigger bed, a deep purple gash over her eye, another man on her mind. Bless them. Bless them as they weep on their own sagging shoulders, rolling the soft syllables of love around in their mouths. Bless them as they bend the bartender's ear with blues he pretends he's never heard, as he nods patiently to every twist of their gut. Bless them as even the shot glasses take on the curves of women. Bless them as the barkeep closes shop and our boys link wobbly arms and croon their blues to an amused moon who bends their hearts until she realizes that only a woman has the balls to break them. I'm gonna turn a fan on, 1 second. Okay, so I need to know from you guys, because this was originally scheduled for like half an hour. I was like, who gets spanked if I go over time?
No one gets spanked if you go over time.
Okay, because it's kind of hard to fit everything in half an hour. So I'll stick with the 2 poems, and I'm skipping 1 book because I couldn't find my copy.
What's that one book you're skipping?
I'm skipping the book Close to Death. I ran around the house. I think I may have lent it to someone. But in 2006, I lost my publisher and I started entering contests because I didn't know anything. So I started entering contests, and this book, Teahouse of the Almighty, won one of the National Poetry Series. There are 5 winners, and they assign each book to a specific publisher. So at this point, my book was published with Coffee House, which is a major independent press. It was a little interesting though, because when I first got the call from Coffee House, they said, "Oh, you're one of those slam people, aren't you?" So I don't think they were expecting the book to be any good. There was an issue still about how qualified people who began in performance were when it came to writing on the page. At this time, I had decided to go sort of get outside of the slam and go to a lot more poetry readings, and realized that the entirety of the canon belonged to me, not just the performance aspect. And I had started to do a lot of reading on my own, like who are the important poets, who were they influenced by, who influenced them, and started to kind of piece together my own poetry education. So by this time, I was paying a little bit more attention to rhythm and line breaks, and trying to write shorter poems. I did have a question about whether or not I should be writing prose, because my poems are so heavily narrative, and they have a tendency to be long. So 2 poems out of here. There was a case in Chicago. A young girl was assaulted in the stairwell of a housing project, and every night on the news, we would get an update as to her condition, and they didn't give her name out. They would call her Girl X. And so this is a poem for Girl X. Her other name. The first thing we took away was your name. We erased the bleak shame from each syllable, blurred the image of your tiny body broken into network sound bites, snippets of videotape with a swollen face, X'd out. X, as in she is no longer a good girl. X, as in 2 simple lines crossing where a beating heart should be. You were little. You were stutter folded. You were beaten liquid on those stairs. Your skin was slashed. You were raped with a fist and sticks, insecticide sprayed into your seam and down the tunnel of your throat. He must have held your mouth open, stretching the circle, leaving moons in your lip. The violation left you blind and without tongue, wrecked the new clock of you. You were jump rope in double time and pigeon toes, navy blue kids with round toes and soles like paper, jelly sandwiches and grape smashed fingers. You, ashy kneed rose, missing rib, splintered and flinching through a death sleep. In which direction do we pray? To recreate you, they relied on ritual. Weeping nurses gently parted your hair, the teeth of the comb tipped in rubber, and dried blood showered from your scalp like chips of paint. They rubbed warm oil through the unraveling braids, threaded ribbon through to the ends. We will give you back your life by pretending you are still alive. Lowering your ex into a tub of warm water, they scrubbed you with stinging soap, sang songs filled with light and lyric, then dabbed you dry with those brutal sickbed towels, avoiding the left nipple smashed before it began. Wrapping you in the stiff garb of virgins, they told you that you were healed. There in that stark room of beeping machines and blood vials and sterilized silver, they built you a child's body and coaxed your battered heart back inside. Girl, X, the violation left. X, you blind, and X, voiceless. And they braided your hair every day, gently, the ritual insane, strands over, under, through, fingers locked in languid weave until the same of it all brought your voice back. The nurses cheered, told you they'd found a cure for history, that the unreal would refuse to be real. Soon you'll be able to see again, they whispered. I know you never meant to be ungrateful when you rose up half and growled this grace. That's okay. You can keep my eyes. Let's get a shorter one. All right, something a little bit shorter to try and make up some of the time. She says, unable to find a short poem in said book. Okay, yeah, okay. This is, I did a reading once with a guy called C.R. Avery, and he's a kind of a singer and he has, it's so funny to say, he can do a million things with his mouth. And, you know, and I mean, like he imitates different instruments and he plays the harp and he does all kinds of wonderful things. And it was very sensual to watch him work. His entire repertoire was coming from his mouth. So this is called What Men Do With Their Mouths. Cue the frenzied combo of molar and spit. His tongue touches every chroma on its way to blue. He deftly conjures washboards and rubber. Even suburban girls lie still for the twinging, the Hubert reckoning. I want to coax last night's corona from his chin, rub my index finger along the surface of his laugh, pull it open to check the throat's slick road. Something illegal's going on down there, the sweet keening of ancient instruments. Wonder Boy opens beauteous, and words become both otherwise and everything. That's that book. Okay. I started an MFA program in 2008. Why did I start an MFA program? I had books already, but you know how people have conversations about poetry and you've had conversations with people and have no idea what you're talking about. And yes, William Carlos Williams, and I had no idea what was going on. So I hated that. You know, I thought I want to know everything. If I'm choosing this for my life, I want to know as much as I can know. And I went into a program, and MFA programs are interesting in that some of them expect you to come in entirely voiceless. and they want to build your voice. They want to be responsible for legitimizing your voice. And some of them, when you come in and you already have a sense, I had a strong sense of who I was. I just wanted to know what poetry, the poetry I was doing, what it was built upon. You know, I wanted to know who are these people, what are the names, and why is this woman crying now because I don't like Emily Dickinson. There's a woman a teacher who cried. She said, "It's Emily Dickinson." And I said, I appreciate your passion. You know, I appreciate your passion, but she's not doing the same. She's, you know, she's not bringing me what she's bringing you, and that's okay. You know, so I was the person in the front row of all the classes shooting my hand up going, I'm sorry, I don't know who that is. You know, can you recommend, you know, people would name poets in the course of teaching something, and I would say, can you recommend a book so I can back up and do that? You know, I was so greedy for all the knowledge that I could get. And this book, I started working on in 2006. Hurricane Katrina was in 2005. I started working on it in 2006. And when I entered my MFA program, all the packets I would hand in would be poems from this book. And so this wound up being my thesis. I learned a lot. I learned so much. And one of the things I learned is I went to school to study with Annie Finch, and Annie Finch is like the mistress of metrics. She's taken poetic meter into her body somehow. And my first conversation with her, I was talking, and I said, "Are you looking at my mouth while I'm talking?" She said, "Yes." I said, "Are you scanning what I'm saying?" And she said, "Yes." You know, and I realized that when I was doing work from the stage, when I revised that, I was always revising for sound. And when I was revising for sound, many times I was revising into a meter. I just didn't know the names, you know? And so a lot of the things we put on the table, and she said, "Well, oh yeah, look at these dactyls." And I'm going, what, you know? So I had to learn the name for all that stuff. So it was a really exhilarating time. It was wonderful. And there's another whole story about how this book came to be a book, but I won't talk about that because we don't have that much time. I will say that this was the first time I realized that the persona was a device that should be used sparingly, but you know exactly when you should use it. And this book didn't begin to take shape until I personified Katrina, until the storm was able to be the overarching of all of this, because I'm not from the Gulf region. You know, I don't have any real authority to write this story. And that was another thing, you know, whether or not it was a legitimate story for me to even approach. But I wanted to read one of the first poems in Katrina's voice. 5 p.m. Tuesday, August 23rd, 2005. Data from an Air Force Reserve Unit reconnaissance aircraft, along with observations from the Bahamas and nearby ships, indicate that the broad low pressure area over the southeastern Bahamas has become organized enough to be classified as Tropical Depression 12. So you got to see Katrina grow in the course of the beginning of the book. That was the National Hurricane Center. A muted thread of gray light, hovering ocean, becomes throat, pulls in wriggle, anemone, kelp, whitens with the want of it. I become a mouth, thrashing hair, an overdone eye. How dare the water belittle my thirst, treat me as just another small disturbance, try to feed me from the bottom of its hand. I will require praise, unbridled winds to define my body in a crime behind my teeth, because every woman begins as weather, sips slow thunder and knows her hips, Every woman harbors a chaos and can wait for it, straddling a fever. For now, I console myself with small furies, those dips in my dawning system. I pull in a bored breath. The brine shivers. And one more, 8 a.m. Sunday, August 28th, Katrina becomes a Category 5 storm, the highest possible rating. For days, I've been offered blunt slivers of larger promises. Even flesh, my sweet recurring dream, has been tantalizingly dangled before me. I have crammed my mouth with buildings, brushed aside skimpy altars, snapped shut windows to bright shatter with my fingers, and I've warned them, soft, you must not know my name. Could there be other weather, other divas stalking the cringing country with insistent eye? Could there be other rain laced with the slick flick of electric and my own pissed boom? Or could this be it? Finally, my praise day, all my fist at once. Now officially a bitch, I'm confounded by noise. All I've ever been is starving and fluid. So I huff a huge sulk, thrust out my chest, open wide my solo swallowing eye. You must not know. Scarlet glare fixed on the trembling crescent. I fly. Yes, thank you. So the from Teahouse of the Almighty had a National Poetry Series award, and Blood Dazzler was a finalist for a book award. So I really, at this time, had to, I have a community of readers who read my work, who don't pat me on the back and say, that's good, that's good, that's good. I have wonderful, some really good poets who read my work, and some people who I read along in the open mic with. I think, those people are very important to me. And people who never became poets, but whose voices I began to trust, So Shoulda Been Jimi Savannah is an interesting thing for me to take on, because for a lot of reasons, my history has kind of come to me in dribs and drabs and pieces. And so I was calling it a memoir in verse. It's roughly chronological. It starts with my parents coming up from the South and what it was like to be first generation up North. This is the one I had gotten to when the call started, so I wasn't sure what I was going to read, but I'm going to try to do some shorter poems. And this is the one where the forms really took hold, where I realized that a lot of poems that I had been carrying around for a long time were not finished, or were so difficult to finish because they were asking for something I did not yet know how to do. And as I learned more forms and kind of put them into my toolbox, I found an answer to a lot of those poems. So I am going, I'll do this one. This is basically a bunch of limericks looped together, because I thought, why is a limerick always supposed to be a comic form? And if I just kept going and going and going, would that be interesting? So it's a limerick about my love for Smokey Robinson when I was a little kid. There once was a song that took hold of a child, 'cause the tale that it told made her feel flushed and held until she was compelled to play it again, to behold the craving encased in each note that slipped from the singer's sleek throat, 'cause the beg that he sighed made her ache from inside. She was moved by his words to devote her tomorrows to all he had said. She was told she was out of her head, but his tenor dug deep, interrupting her sleep, so she did some wild dreaming. Instead of singing it dizzy, she would pretend that he loved her or could. In her mirror, she braced for his kiss and the taste of his mouth. Every day, there she stood in a room by herself, all alone, with a body no longer her own. All her soul was engrossed in no more than a ghost. Every moment, a new stepping stone toward an empty that she didn't dare to name, knowing Smokey was never to blame, though she whispered no fair as she slow danced with air, her hip heavy waltzing a shame. But if the song made her prefer the conjure, the hot him in her, she would live in her head, stunned in love, newly wed, the real just a feverish blur. So she drowned in the silk of his voice just because there was never a choice. She was helplessly shook by his ooh la la hook, not a thing left to do but rejoice in a romance that really was none, in a two that was really just one. She was fatally awed by a falsetto god, his wooing had left her undone. There once was a song that took hold of a child, 'cause the story it told made her feel flushed and held until she was compelled to give in to the lies that it told. And one more from this. Okay. Not only was I thinking about, forms like sestinas and villanelles and but also utilizing anaphora, repetition and repetition and release, all these strange things. So this is a church poem. Because we sipped blood siphoned from grocery store grapes, because matrons squinted at the dim crackling pages of hymnals, because we obediently warbled exactly what we found there, because spurting prompt hallelujahs was serious business, because my mother's gilded tooth flashed when she begged, because on Sundays we presented God with several options, because Reverend Thomas's sick ankles were stiff and blue with fluid, because his spat truths were mangled by bad tooth and spittle, because he made 72 years move like some golden engine, because Tony, the choir director, was, how you say it, a sissy, because that old organ wailed like the B-side of a black slap, because the pocked wooden floor left language on our knees, because the rafters grew slimy with wailing, because Judas, a pimp in blacklight, was smirking at Jesus again, because somebody definitely acted up and conjured Mississippi, because salt pork flailed in a skillet in the basement kitchen, because Lord knows we were all going to be crazy hungry, because the Holy Ghost was dawdling in the men's room, because he had scanned the crowd and wasn't crazy about his odds, because the grandbabies of freed slaves shimmied in their seats, because every upright elder in the front row blathered with fever, because crosses unblessed with bodies were everywhere, because every one of those wooden tees bellowed something out loud, because just like last time, the fun word of the day was sacrifice, because that sissy popped like a tear dripped on a red stovetop, because he flowed our whole upturned voices from his fingers, because worshipers with straightened hair wept slivers of delta, because we were a tangled mess of sanctified thighs and tongues, because several instigators whispered, just let the Lord come in, because Annie Pearl Smith's dazzled eyes got all the way wide, because her mumbled and hard-grilled waistline twisted in bliss, because thick bodies hit the floor hard, squalling, convulsing, because prim ushers dug white-gloved fingers into our forearms, because I had to gaze into the peppermint of my mother's wail, because I questioned what soft holy monster writhed inside her, because I had once again been spared the slick sleight hand of the devious divinity, because that twirling sissy and I loved wrong and were loved wrong, because when Tony sniffed haughty at the thrashing, collapsing congregation and whipped the choir in the direction of flame, I felt the organ's bright asking drip like fuel into the blood feeding my little hip. So I struck the match. We're getting there. Wait a minute. Did this come after this? I think it did. Okay. We're up to date. We're up to date. I think, yeah. This is excuse my picture. This is a sticker that the organization Urban Word New York City made for me. So I went to one of their events and they were selling stickers and it was like James Baldwin, Erykah Badu, and me. And this comes because one of the joys in my life is going back and going to slams and going to the Poetry Out Loud competitions, and you know, it's so much heat and motion and energy in that. And I love the fact that something that I kind of saw the creation of is just so it's out of control now in all the most wonderful ways, you know. And so I am now officially, I hate saying this, an elder of the poetry, elder. So this book is called Incendiary Art. This book, I would like to thank Donald Trump for this book. This was written mostly during his campaign for president. As a matter of fact, the title came from, you know, a lot of the things that I could think of in my past had fire was involved. When you know, I remember the 4 little girls who, you know, died in the church in Birmingham, and the riots after Martin Luther King's assassination burned down the neighborhood where I was living. And this guy at a Trump rally, you know, it was overheard, he was saying, I can't say it for sure, but that he always wondered what it was like to burn a Black man alive, you know. And so that's where the name comes from. Originally, this was going to be called When Black Men Drowned Their Daughters. That was the poem. Those poems began the book. And then I realized that that book was going to be so incredibly hard to write. I expanded it to a lot of ways that men drown, like psychologically, mentally, their daughters, you know, how the patriarchy works into that. But it was just so, it was too dark for even me, and I just stopped and really didn't think I could keep writing in that vein. And so I turned to something else, which were these 2 news articles I had cut out. One about a man drowning his infant daughter, and then a year or so later, another one about a man drowning his toddler daughter. And I started out with those, and then realized that while I'm doing this, there's these drum beats of deaths of you know, Black men and women going on. And so I turned to that, and I always ask my students what's to listen for the voice you're not hearing. And in those instances, the voice I wasn't hearing was the mother's voice. You would hear the mother twice, once when someone came to tell her that her son or daughter was dead, and then again at the end of it when she was told that the person deemed responsible for the death of her son and daughter was found not responsible, and then they disappear. So I wanted to then put the focus of the book on these mothers. So there's a couple of really long poems in here that I won't read, but I will read 2 of the Incendiary Art poems, and then I'll read something I just wrote, and then we'll be done. Okay. Oh, so this book won the Lenore Marshall Prize from the Academy of American Poets. So at some point, I still was kind of in awe of a lot of poetry and a lot of poets. Like I'd be in a room doing something, I go, oh my God, that's Sharon Olds right there, you know? And so I wouldn't trade the way I came up for anything, because that I'm constantly discovering things. Everything's just like every morning that you wake up and there's a new slate and there's a million things you can do with it. So 2 incendiary art poems. The city's streets are densely shelved with rows of salt and packaged hair. Intent on air, the funk of crave and function comes to blows with any smell that isn't oil. The blare of storefront chicken settles on the skin and mango spritzing drips from razored hair. The corner chefs cue pork, decide again on cayenne, fry in grease that's glopped with dust. The sizzle of the feast adds to the din of children strutting slant, their wanderlust and cussing, plus the loud and tactless hiss of dogged hustlers bellowing past gusts of peppered breeze, that fatty, fragrant bliss in skillets. All our rampant hunger tricks us into thinking we can dare dismiss the thing men do to boulevards, the wicks their bodies be. A city strapped for art delights in torching them, at first for kicks, to waltz to whirling sparks, but soon those hearts thud thinner, whittled by the chomp of heat. Outlined in chalk, men blacken and curl apart. Their blindly rising fume is bittersweet, although reversals in the air could fool us into thinking they weren't meant as meat. Our sons don't burn their cities as a rule, born as they are, up to their necks in fuel. And one that comes, near the end of the book. Okay. Incendiary Art, the body. I've nightmared your arrive, glum fists punching their way out of your own body. The blind stumbled through the buckled vein of your throat as your nerve endings sputtered and blew. I've dipped my finger into a vaporous pool of your skin. The heat blessed your whole new self with horizon, square-jawed boy. With such potent intent, you blared illicit and just enough saint. Now, with so many northern days between us, you are much easier to God. But they are looking for you. They are wildly slushing fuel across the landscape, and they are screeching your name. Today, one said, I sure would like to burn a black man alive. So yes, you left us here with undulating acres of fools and that particular stank leg of gospel. You left us all this snuff, hawk, and proud little bowleg. You left their brains stunned by dairy and fat meat. You left us not much path, even after your body was that brief and beauteous torch. They seem to remember you fondly, and there are unstruck matches everywhere.